Hey everybody. So today in this video I'm going to be talking about 3 different stories from H.P. Lovecraft, and the reason why I decided to do it this way is because the next story that I'm going to be talking about is a very long one, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. I'm currently in the middle of listening to that one right now, so hopefully I'm going to get that one done today so I can do the video and get it out to you guys tomorrow. So, with that out of the way, let's continue. So the 3 stories that I'm going to be talking about today, and as usual, doing a summary and my own quick review, are called Cool Air, Dagon, and The Descendant. The Descendant is the shortest of the 3, and I'm going to be talking about them in that order. So, Cool Air is about a young man who he ends up moving into something like a tenant house. So he's renting out a room from a family, and one of the other tenants is an older man who is a doctor, or he's very, very good at healing. And he also he keeps his room very, very cold. So anyways, throughout the beginning of the story, the narrator, he starts to learn more about his neighbor, his upstairs neighbor, the one who's a doctor and everything. And eventually he comes to meet him because the narrator, almost has a heart attack, and he goes to his upstairs neighbor, which, just to keep things kind of clear, I'm going to call him Mr. Freeze. So, the narrator goes to Mr. Freeze, and Mr. Freeze saves his life, and the narrator kind of becomes something of an apprentice to Mr. Freeze. Now, Freeze is telling him about how he kind of came to be, and how he has to keep everything cold for him to live, and how he learned from all sorts of different doctors and whatnot. Well, the narrator helps him out with everything, and eventually there's one night where the cooling system in Freeze's room ends up going out because of a bad piston, and there's no mechanics or anything like that to be able to replace the piston because of the time of night and everything's closed, so they have to wait until the morning. Well, Freeze doesn't really like that, because he says that if he gets too warm, he'll die, and he's got to keep it really cold. We're talking like below freezing kind of cold. So Freeze goes into the bathroom and has the narrator go and try to find ice for him, as much ice as he can, in order to keep him cool. Well, narrator's kind of having a tough time of it, and he ends up hiring some rando guy to be doing the ice stuff, while the narrator, looks for a mechanic or a mechanic shop that will be able to replace the piston and fix the cooling system. Well, the narrator fails in his quest, and the rando guy who he hired got really freaked out and left screaming because of what he saw. And when the narrator and the landlord end up going back to the room, the narrator goes inside, and the landlord doesn't want anything to do with it, but they see this very strange slime, like this strange black slime that led from the bathroom to a desk, and on that desk was written Freeze's last last words. And then that trail led over to the couch, and there's a big old slimy spot where Freeze died. So Freeze melted. He literally melted. I have no idea how Freeze got into that predicament. I'd have to read through it again because it's been a couple of days. But once again, it's another story that I enjoyed. As I've said before, I like Lovecraft's style in his writing. He's very, very descriptive. And I think later on I'm going to get the actual physical copy of his complete fiction and actually read through it myself, because I think there's some things that get lost in listening to it, you know, depending on who's actually reading it and how they read it and the tones of their voice and everything, and if they get louder or quieter. So my hearing isn't the best, so there's some stuff that I miss. But anyways, I highly recommend it. It's a good story. Now the next one, Dagon. I think that one's a more well-known one of Lovecraft's works. In that, it is written from the perspective of a sailor who has gone insane and is contemplating suicide. So this is his suicide note as to why he thought that he could not live any longer and just had to end it all. So he was a sailor, and years before, during the First World War, him and his crew were in the South Pacific, and a German U-boat sinks the ship that he was on and captures them. Well, captures the survivors. Well, the sailor, he decides that he does not want to be a German prisoner, and so he somehow gets a hold of a boat. I don't know how the hell he does that on a submarine, but, well, he does, and gets some food and water and everything, and he escapes, and he's drifting out in the middle of the South Pacific. Well, days go by, and eventually one night he wakes up to see that he washed up on some very strange island. Now this island is nothing but a big black expanse of mud and muck that looks like it was part of the seafloor that just rose up to the surface. Kind of like what happens in the Call of Cthulhu with Cthulhu's city of R'lyeh. Well, the sailor waits for a few days while the sun dries everything out, and eventually everything becomes dry enough for him to walk on. So he gathers some provisions and he sets off just to try to see how big the island is, if there's any other shore, or if he can see a ship or something like that. So he's walking for days, and eventually he comes up to something that's like the rim of a crater. So he climbs up to the top, and let's see here, I'm trying to remember. I think he decided to wait until nightfall to climb up to the top because of how hot and everything it was. So at night he climbs up to the rim of this crater, and he looks down it, and it's just like a big pit. Well, he climbs on down, and once he gets to the bottom, he sees that there's like a pool in the middle of it, and on the other side is this big monolith. And this monolith has a bunch of carvings on it of several different sea creatures, whales, fish, sharks, creatures that he he or any other human had never seen before, but he kind of recognized them from the bones and such that he came across while he was walking. And this thing is like, just this giant monolith with these weird, strange looking fish people carved on it as well. And it's very, very unsettling for the sailor. And then, next thing that he knows, he hears something come out from the water at the bottom of this crater. And he sees a large, scaly hand grab the monolith, and the sailor freaks out, and he just nopes his way on out of there and makes his way back to his boat. And the whole time he's just delusional, becomes delirious, his mind was broken by what he saw. And he gets back to the boat, he just climbs in there and curls up, and the next thing that he knows, he wakes up in a hospital. Well, after he passed out, I guess the landmass that he was on sunk back beneath the waves, and he was picked up by a ship, and that ship didn't see any landmass or anything like that, as the sailor was just floating out there. And so the ship rescued him, brought him back to civilization, and he spent time in the hospital and was nursed back to physical health, but his mind was just completely shattered by what he saw and what he went through. And so he tried to self-medicate, ended up getting addicted to morphine, and eventually the morphine wasn't doing anything, and he was running out of it and running out of money. So he decided to end it all. And towards the end of his suicide note, he has something very disturbing, because outside of his door he hears some flop, flop, flop of something wet and squishy and fish-like, and he can hear something scrabbling at his door. And now I don't know if whatever it was at his door actually opened the door, or if it just stuck its hand like underneath the door, but he sees the hand of this thing, and it's a scaly fish person hand. And well, the man presumably jumps out the window to his death. So, like I've said before, I really prefer in horror kind of stories, mystery stories, when the monster or the antagonist or ghost or whatever it is never really fully revealed. So I kind of like that about this one. And one thing that you'll notice about Lovecraft's work is that he ties everything together. As you'll notice when I talk about the dream quest for unknown Kadath, there's ties to other dream stories that he had written, such as Celophaeus. That's going to come up in that. So you can kind of think of Lovecraft as and his world as kind of like the MCU, where everything's interconnected. Some people like that, other people don't. But I personally like it, as far as Lovecraft goes, because it's like he was the OG MCU, which is kind of neat. But anyways, the last story that we'll be talking about today, or that I'll be talking about, is called The Descendant. This one's a short story. It's about an old man in London who he kind of keeps to himself, kind of strange and eccentric. Well, not really eccentric, but he's strange. Keeps to himself. He's got this cat that stays with him. And the man gets frightened very easily. For example, whenever there's church bells or something like that starts ringing, it scares the hell out of him, and he starts screaming, and the cat does too, and it's just really weird. And this old man, he's staying at another kind of tenant boarding house, with the narrator and another character who is a young man who, when he first sees the old guy, the young man just kind of immediately knows that this old guy has a lot of secrets that he would be able to share. And so the young man, I think his name was William, the young guy's name. So William decides to try to befriend him, the old man, and the old man's kind of a little bit standoffish and everything, but it's later revealed that the old man is a baron at some castle that has some very strange stories connected to it. That goes all the way back to Roman Britain and a Roman soldier who actually built the castle and is most likely the old man's ancestor. And this Roman soldier officer, he was getting into some very strange occult-like stuff and got kicked out of the Roman army for it. But anyways, William finds that out, and eventually William, he's very involved with the occult. He comes across the Necronomicon at a bookshop, which I believe that was actually covered in Lovecraft's story titled The Book. I think it's the same character, who is this William guy. So William buys the Necronomicon, brings it back, tries to translate it and everything, but he can't, and so he asks the old man to help, and the old man freaks out about it. And then the old man kind of tells him all of the different family stories and kind of what he went through while delving into the occult. And, well, that's it. That's the end of the story. Like I said, it's a short one. It was pretty good, but I probably overlooked some certain points in it, because this was a couple of days ago that I listened to it, and like I said, my hearing isn't really the best, so maybe there was some stuff in it that I had missed that I may have to reread through it. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, like with Lovecraft's other works, and you know, this is kind of inspiring me to try to write some short stories of my own. I don't know where I'm going to be going with that, but eventually, sometime here in the near future, I'm going to start doing that. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you guys all have a great day. If anybody's wondering, I'm in Colorado, heading on I-70 towards Denver. So got a load that I got to deliver today. So anyways, thanks again, and hope you guys have a great day.